Hello, everyone. My guest today is Philip Soffer. He's the CEO of Test.io since May of 2016, and has been since May of 2016, splitting his time between Berlin and the San Francisco Bay Area. Before Test.io, he held senior leadership roles in product development and marketing at Plumtree Software, Lithium Technologies, and Piazza. Philip, are you ready to take us to the top?
I am.
All right. Tell us about Test. I'm guessing it's in the DevOps space, which we know is a very, very hot space. So what do you do?
We provide software crowd testing services to companies. So if you need your software tested by real human beings using real devices in the real world, we have a network of people around the world who like to do that, and you can get that done in as quickly as an hour for an exploratory test.
Okay, and how does this compare to something, I've used usertesting.com before. It's kind of manual. You say who you want to test it, and you say, go through this process, and it screen records and sends it back to you. How do you differ?
So that's really a usability test. Our tests are functional tests. So you give some guidance through our interface about what you want to test and what's changed, and what we're providing is functional bugs, basically.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And give me a general sense of what customers are paying for this per month on average.
Well, the base price is $3,000 a month for a subscription for a product that we test, and when you pay for that subscription, you can test as many times as you want. And so what we encourage our customers to do is basically do a lot of testing and do it earlier in their development process. But we also have customers who will test early in their development process and even test in production, test when they do code merges. So we're all about trying to shift the testing left and more often when you do this kind of testing.
But Philip, you said the base is $3,000 a month.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're very much kind of in the enterprise space.
No, I would say we're in the SMB space.
You have small businesses paying $3,000 a month for testing. For some people, that would be north of 30-40% of their monthly revenue.
Well, not that small.
Okay, got it. That's why I'm asking, right? So
enterprise to us means $1 billion in revenue, right? We have some customers that are like that.
How do you define small business? You said you're in SMB.
SMB would be like 100 to 500 people, and in the millions of revenue.
You're going to make so many enemies on this. Everyone listening with us and 100 employees are going to go, well, Philip doesn't even care about us.
Well, there's only so many people that we can sell to profitably, and we try to target those. This is a profitable company. We're not sort of one of these high flying Silicon Valley companies that goes on endlessly without profits.
That's good. So profitable. You're cash flow positive today.
Yeah,
that's great. Okay, so 3,000 base, and by the way, I don't want to go on every customer cohort, but is $3,000 a month a good kind of representation of the average, or is it actually much higher than that?
The average is higher than that.
Okay, can you give me a general range of what the average might be?
Higher than 3K. I'd say the average is probably for new customers that we sign now, it's probably in the 4.5 range.
Okay, and have you kind of said that very specifically. Do you have historical customers that have a much cheaper price point and you've increased over time? Why do you phrase it like that?
Yeah, so the company is 7 years old now, and obviously when it was a startup, they were willing to accept lower prices before they knew everything about what things cost. So in those days, people signed on with cheaper plans and maybe got deals that we can't sustain anymore profitably. So so some people are less than the average, but new customers are signing on at higher averages.
So how do you handle that? Because every company goes through that in the maturation process. Folks who came on early, you maybe give a discount to. Do you just let them stay at that same price point for the same features, or do you kind of kindly ask them to go up to the new price point? How do you manage that?
I think it's a combination. We've basically sort of restructured our pricing over time, and each time we do it, we try to get people into a new band of pricing that they would be more comfortable with the price and what they're doing with the software or with the service.
That's great.
So it's we don't stick it to anybody, but we like to have conversations about it.
So 2011, you've been building this thing for 7 years. What have you scaled to today in terms of total customers on the platform?
It's somewhere in the neighborhood of 180 customers.
180. Okay, great. And I know you said you're not like some high-flying Silicon Valley company, but have you raised capital or are you bootstrapped?
So the company, has raised capital in the past. I guess the headline number that you would see from the 2015 fundraise, which is before I got there, is $5 million.
So walk me through this dynamic. You're currently CEO, but it sounds like you're not the founder. What happened there?
Well, so I was actually recruited to be the CEO in 2016. So the money that was put in the previous year was designed to underwrite a U.S. expansion. So Test.io originally is a German company based in Berlin, but obviously the biggest market for software testing services is going to be in the U.S. because we develop a lot of software here, and so. The board understood that it would be valuable to have somebody with some Silicon Valley or U.S. experience, and so that was the auspices under which I was hired. And the company didn't actually have a CEO at that time.
Philip, was that by the way, was that contingent? In other words, they basically said, "We'll put $5 million in, but you've got to let us put a new CEO in, and it's going to be Philip."
No.
It wasn't. Okay.
The money came in before I was hired.
So who pursued you? Who was the person on the team that pursued you? Was it an investor or one of the founders or what?
This is actually an interesting story. I don't know how far back you want to go, but if you go back to 1999,
Jesus, Philip,
that you can do that. I worked for Plumtree, which was basically sort of a talent factory. Our philosophy at Plumtree was you go. And you hire the smartest people that you can possibly find, regardless of how much or how little experience they had. And so we did a lot of college recruiting out of the local colleges. And I was at Berkeley recruiting people, and I recruited a guy there who, at the age of 21, was already incredibly mature and sophisticated in his understanding of markets. Ended up doing M&A for Plumtree. Then ended up doing private equity, and basically he's got a firm, and he is the one who introduced me to the Test.io team. He's an investor in Test.io. So I basically hired out of college somebody who is now on my board and effectively my boss.
That's funny.
Which is funny, and it's an interesting testament to longevity in this business.
Was this one of the folks from Turn River?
That's right.
Oh, very good. Very good. That's great. Okay, good. So walk me through funding, obviously raised back then. You've since invested that. If I take the customer account you just gave me 180 multiplied by the ARPU you just gave me, so call it $4,500 per month. I mean, that puts you guys at almost a $9 million, $10 million ARR run rate. Is that accurate or am I too high or too low?
It's, I don't want to quote specific numbers, but it's broadly accurate.
Okay. Let me ask you a different question. When do you think you pass $10 million in ARR? Is that a goal for this year or next year or what?
That is a goal for soon.
Oh, okay. Goal for soon. Good. Good. Let's move forward on some of the economic stuff, right? So in terms of customer growth, as you're driving growth year over year, are you driving expansion revenue at a high rate, or is more the new revenue coming from brand new customers?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so more of the revenue is coming from new customers, but we are focusing now more heavily on expansion than we were. As we've matured as a company, we've been able to differentiate sort of the hunter from the farmer, so to speak, on the sales side. And so previous to about 6 or 8 months ago, we didn't really have anybody who was focused on expansion sales, and now we do.
And walk me through kind of what growth has looked like over the past year. Then we'll jump more into the sales team and kind of what your team looks like. So if you're kind of flirting or around in the general range of 9 million-ish today or 800 grand per month, where were you a year ago?
Oh gosh, I don't even remember. Generally, we grow 60, 65, somewhere in there year over year.
Okay.
Which is, I think, been fairly consistent over the last 2 or 3 years. That's been the level of growth. But what's interesting is that we did that while achieving profitability, right?
That's great.
So, I think one of the things about being a German company that has been funded with fairly limited capital is that there's just different habits than you have in Silicon Valley companies that I've worked at. So we have focused on capital efficiency and on being being able to be profitable at a lower run rate than a lot of companies would.
No, that's great. Walk me through, churn is critical in a SaaS business. What's your churn today and how do you think about it?
Well, so we think about it basically on a cohort basis. So are we getting better at retaining and expanding the customers that we've been signing on? And so, a couple of years ago, we were not so good at that.
Come on, Philip, tell me how bad.
I'm not gonna give up all the numbers, but
what's bad though? North of what? What's bad in general? Not for you specifically, but in the industry.
Well, I think the industry is a weird term because you have to segment it in a lot of different ways, right? Like if you're a system of record kind of SaaS company, then your stickiness is very high because the switching costs are extremely high because you hold the data. Whereas for somebody like us, we're a service, and we basically aspire to be, for our customers, a really easy way to turn on software testing in the way that you can turn on more servers if you're Amazon, if you're using AWS or Google Cloud or whatever. So we operate under a slightly different set of assumptions than if we were a system of record. But anyway, we're in our latest cohorts, we're close to 100% net revenue retention
per year.
Which is, for the on the cohort basis.
Yep. So that's a combination of expansion revenue, more and more making up for any lost revenue.
That's right.
Yeah, that's great. CAC, what's CAC look like today, and how aggressive are you being on payback periods?
Well, CAC is good for us. I mean, our CAC to LTV ratio is really good, and so I'm not gonna quote all the numbers, but we don't spend a lot of money on marketing, so our customer acquisition costs are fairly low.
Well, what's your total team size today, Philip?
I'd say the team totally in both geographies is 40 at this point.
And what are the two geographies? Where are you guys based?
So there's a group here in the United States in the Bay Area, and then there's another group in Berlin.
Berlin. Okay, so 40 people. And how many of the 40 are based on like sales or marketing or onboarding?
Well, sales I would say is about half of those people. Marketing is one full-time person. And then we have a customer success team as well, which is, not sales and not marketing, more on the onboarding side, I guess you'd say. And that's about 7 people. Okay.
So call it 27 people, or maybe 28 people total. That's, out of 40, that's actually a pretty significant chunk, right? So you're not doing any direct paid spend, but if you did take a fully weighted CAC, you do have significant cost with obviously all those salaries. What do you like to see? Like how quickly do you like to get your money back in terms of payback period?
3 to 4 months.
Okay, that's super healthy. Now, was it really bad when you joined because again they had $5 million of play money and they were kind of overspending on acquisition, or no?
No, okay. It's never been bad. I mean, this has always been an extremely capital efficient company. So as much as I would like to take credit for like going medieval on CAC, that was definitely not what we were doing. And I think where we've gotten better. We've gotten a lot better at sort of the onboarding process, the customer success process. I don't put those folks as part of CAC. I put them as, because they do, they're not just about acquisition of the revenue. They're really about the lifetime customer success and retention. So I think about those folks differently than I think about salespeople or marketing people.
That's interesting. But I mean, if you didn't have that team, right? And these people, you could say we acquired the customer, but they churn after 3 months because they weren't properly activated. That activation team is, it's critical to you being able to hit your payback period targets and your lifetime value targets.
For sure it is. Yeah, for sure it is.
Interesting.
But it's just it is a different kind of spend than the sales and marketing spend.
Yep. Interesting. Last 2 questions before we wrap up with the famous 5. Are you raising capital today?
Not that I want to talk about. I mean, it's not. I mean, I'm not out raising capital for VCs.
Yeah, if you did have an additional $10 million, where would you spend it? Have you identified kind of a growth channel?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have historically spent not as much as we might on marketing, specifically on getting our name out there, sort of brand recognition kinds of things. And so, if we were marketing aggressively to what I call the enterprise companies. That is, companies that are really big that rely, for example, on analyst reports and so on. Like we're not in that world.
Yep. QA Symphony just went through an interesting merger. The combined company is probably going to be called between 80, 85 million bucks in ARR. If they approach you and say, hey, we want to buy you guys for 80, 90 million bucks, do you sell the company?
I couldn't answer that. But it obviously, like everybody's got their price, right?
Let me ask you a different question. Whose decision is that to make? Do you have enough of the company where it's your decision, or is it really kind of Turn River and the other investors?
I think it's a board level decision, obviously, to sell the company. And,
yeah. Very good. All right, Philip, let's wrap up here with the famous five. Number one, what's your favorite business book?
So I'm going to go a little rogue on this one. I think business books as a genre are not my favorite genre, so I don't read too many of them. But I read books about business, especially sort of interesting stories. So let me give you a few that I've read recently, and then one that's not about business that I always...
Give it to me.
All right. So you should read Bad Blood about the Theranos situation. That's a fascinating book, and it tells a cautionary tale. You should read American Kingpin about Silk Road and Ross Ulbricht and sort of his rise and fall, which is I think almost a Greek tragedy level of story. And then this is a book that I tell everybody to read who's working in a startup. It's not about a business. It's The Making of the Atomic Bomb by Richard Rhodes. Which is, in my mind, the greatest startup story of all time, because you had the brightest people, you had an amazing fundraising process, but a pretty hard to please board, and then you had a literal deadline. And the story of how that all came together and how it works is incredible.
Number two, those are great. Number two, give me a CEO you're following or studying right now.
So my favorite CEO is Glenn Kelman from Redfin. I worked for him at Plumtree. He was an amazing person, and I always knew that he would be an amazing CEO, and it's fun to watch.
And I believe when did they go public? It was what, a year ago, or pretty recent?
It was last year, and then they had a nice run up, and then Glenn, who is compulsively honest, said on his investor call the other day that he thinks that the real estate market is softening. And the stock lost 25% of its value overnight. But I think Glenn is going to win in the end.
Yeah. Number three, what's your favorite online tool for building a business?
Oh gosh, for building a business, that's so what do we use? I mean, we use the stack, the stack that has outreach in it, LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Like, these are the tools that we use a lot for prospecting. I have one tool that I use in my personal life that's made a big difference for me lately. So I get a lot of spam phone calls, and I installed this thing called RoboKiller that blocks them. It's been a material improvement in my quality of life, because I get like 10 spam phone calls during the day. And
that's great. RoboKiller. Number four, how many hours of sleep do you get every night?
I strive for 7. I usually get maybe 6.5.
Okay. And Phil, what's your situation? Married, single, kids?
I'm married. I have 3 kids.
Oh, wow. Okay. And how old are you?
How old am I?
Yeah.
You really want to know that?
Yeah.
I'm 47.
I asked that because I like my audience to be able to say, oh, I'm 47 too, and I thought I couldn't be CEO or have my own startup. But look, Philip's doing it. I can too.
Look, this old guy can do it. This is being videoed. Like, some people are going to see it on video, right?
Nah, you'll be good. Last question here, Philip. What do you wish your 20-year-old self knew?
Oh gosh, there's some personal things, and then there's like maybe some professional things. I mean, I think my 20-year-old self thought he was going to be an academic, and I think I would tell that person, be open to alternative possibilities always. And I think I would tell any 20-year-old, cherish the ones that you love and be close to them, because you don't know what's going to happen, and you might lose them sooner than you think.
Guys, there you have it from Philip. Cherish the ones you love. And also on a business side of things, remember there is life outside of academia. He in 2011, not he, but in 2011, Test.io was launched by some founders. A couple years later, 2016, after a $5 million round of funding, Philip joined the company. They're now serving 180 customers, kind of doing functional testing in the SMB space. Each customer is paying, call it $4 or $5 grand per month. They're kind of in the $9 million ARR range, hoping to pass that 10 million mark soon. Net revenue retention, they are flirting with the 100% mark. Obviously, a really healthy place to get above. Willing to spend 3 to 4 months of first year ACV on acquisition. Most of that acquisition cost is tied up in a 27 person or 20 kind of person sales team. They got 40 people between San Fran and Berlin. Again, growing nicely at about 60 to 65% year over year. Philip, thank you for taking us to the top.
All right. Thanks, Nathan.